Hi everyone, this is Miss Cruz. Today we're going to go over what a paper one is. Before we dive into what a paper one is, I want to break down the scores of all your IB papers and what are the marks and points that you want to get for each one, so everybody has a general idea of what each one is worth. And so we're going to start with the breakdown of scores. Remember that IB grades on a scale of 1 through 7. Okay, so for every single subject, you're going to get a score 1 through 7. And the goal that we're going for in each subject is a 4. A 4 is equal to passing or achieving credit in that course. Now, before we move into paper 1, let's break down what each paper is worth. So you guys have all done a paper 2. A paper 2 is worth 30 marks because that is 2 essays. Each essay is worth 15 marks. It's 2 essays in an hour and a half, so you have about 45 minutes to write each essay. A paper 3 is similar, except that it's 3 essays in 2 hours and 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And that one is worth 45 marks. This might change next year because of the pandemic, but we shall see. Your IA, which you guys have been working on, or you should be working on, is worth 25 marks. And your paper 1, which is the one we'll be going over today, is worth 24 marks. All right. And then each paper has its own percentage applied to it to get you this 1 to 7, score. So the paper 1 is worth 20%. The internal assessment is also worth 20%. Paper 2 is worth 25, and paper 3 is worth 35. So we'll be spending a lot of time on how to do paper 2 and paper 3 because those are obviously worth the most. But paper 1 and the IA are still really 40% of your overall score. So we want to make sure we spend a good amount of time on that as well. So it is not in IB's interest for you to get perfect scores on every single paper, but enough to get to passing so that you get this magical 4. So for paper 1, we want to score 10 marks out of 24. For the IA, we want to get to at least 11 marks out of 25. And then for paper 2 and 3, it's pretty similar. For each essay, we want to be scoring between a 6 and a 7, and that's out of 15. So therefore, we want to get a 12 to 14 points out of this one. And we want to be getting 18 to 20 marks on paper 3. And if you're looking at the passing score here, then it seems a lot more doable, I think. So there's your passing. And I want you all to see this because I want you to see that it is possible to get credit in IB history, and that is the whole point of what I'm trying to do, what Miss Avila is trying to do, and eventually Miss Hart as well. So let's dive into paper 1, which is what we'll be going over today. We'll only be going over the first part of paper 1. But essentially, paper 1, the topic will either be civil rights in the U.S. or apartheid in South Africa. You are going to get one of those topics. This quarter, we're going to talk about civil rights in the U.S. We will cover apartheid in South Africa at the beginning of your senior year. But for the end of this year, we'll be talking about civil rights in the U.S. The topic will always be number 13 through 16. So you're going to see 13A, 13B, 14, 15, 16 a lot. And you're also going to see sources M through P a lot. And we do that to get you used to seeing those numbers and saying those letters because that is always the topics you're going to choose when you get to paper 1. So let's start with the first part of a paper 1, which is a 13A. So a paper 1, essentially, starts with a comprehension of a text. So you're going to get 4 different documents, kind of like you did in AP World. And then the first part of it is you are going to try to comprehend, literally kind of give like a summary of what a text is saying. This is worth 3 marks, which means you have to have 3 things to say, okay? Or 3 details to point out. So 3 is the magic number for 13A. Should be pretty easy to remember. You're also going to see the 3 marks on the test. So let's start with a sample of a 13A. So this one says that according to source P, was the Supreme Court's decision in Brown 2 a victory for white Southerners? So that's the first part. We have to look for why is this a victory for white Southerners? And why was it a disappointment for black leaders? So we're looking for victories for white people, Southerners to be specific, and disappointment for black leaders. So the way the sources will always say the source letter at the top, right here. And then the first part in italics, this is the citation. So this part is the citations. This is where you know it comes from. Do not skip over this. This has important information, okay? Do not skip the citation. It has really important information. So this one reads, Michael Klarman, a professor of history, writing about the effect of the Supreme Court's 1955 judgment, which is, our question is kind of asking about that. Our question is asking why it was a victory and a disappointment. So this is talking about the effect of this 1955 judgment, Brown 2, in the academic book, Brown v. Board of Education and the Civil Rights Movement, written in 2007. In Brown 2, the Supreme Court decided on gradualism. So this is telling us what the Supreme Court ruling is. So this seems important. So it decided on gradualism, which is the gradual application of the Supreme Court decision in the Brown v. Board of Education, which was to end school segregation. So Brown v. Board was to end school segregation, and Brown 2, though, said that could gradually happen. It didn't have to happen instantly. So let's read what he says. Let's see if we can find some victories and some disappointments. So Brown 2 was a clear victory for white Southerners. The court approved gradualism, imposed no deadlines for beginning or completing desegregation, issued vague guidelines, and entrusted the final decision to local judges. So there's a lot here. I feel like I've already picked out more than 3 things. So there was no deadline for completing desegregation. So white Southerners were happy about the fact that they didn't really, there was no urgency to desegregate schools. The decision could be given to local judges, those local judges being white. And then, and therefore they could decide later on what they want to do. So already we have 2 points. Now we need to look for disappointments for black leaders. When informed of the decision, Florida legislators, which are lawmakers, broke into cheers. A Mississippi politician celebrated the fact that a local Mississippi judge would decide when segregation would be feasible. That's my husband asking me, why am I talking to my iPad? So I have to read that again. A Mississippi politician celebrated the fact that a local Mississippi judge would decide when desegregation would be feasible or practical. Southern lawmakers commented that desegregation might be feasible in another 50 or 100 years. So they are planning on holding off segregation for this long, okay? Desegregation. They don't want to integrate the schools. They want white schools to stay white and black schools to stay black for that long of time. So then it says black leaders were disappointed with the decision. A black journalist, John H. McCrae, admitted that he can't find too much to cheer about, and he criticized the Supreme Court for seeking to do business with die-hard, determined Southern segregationists. So even though it doesn't exactly say why black leaders are disappointed, we can assume that it's because there is no urgency for integration. And so when I'm writing my 13A, it does need to be in complete sentences. But what you're going to do is you're going to write out 13A in your booklet when you get a booklet next year. And I always like to just use the question as my sentence starter. So Brown 2 was a victory for white Southerners because, and I'm just gonna shorthand here because I'm trying to go a little bit faster. You would actually write out words. So we'll start with white Southerners because the decision to integrate belonged to local white judges who, and this is where we bring up our second point, who would not want to desegregate anytime soon. And I want to add that they wouldn't have to. Brown 2 allowed gradualism. If you feel like, wow, I'm just really stating what the text already said, yeah, you are. You're just using the text to give you your 3 points. Brown 2 allowed gradualism, which, and you can literally copy, which allowed, or I'm not going to say allowed again. You don't have to be this picky though when you're writing. You can just be quick. Brown 2 allowed gradualism, which meant schools could integrate at a slow pace. And now I just have to bring up my last point, which is why black leaders were disappointed. Black leaders were disappointed because there was no longer an urgency to integrate black and white schools. All right, and if I was an IB grader, I would be looking for 3 places to give this, 3 places to give this points. So I'd say Brown 2 is a victory for white Southerners because the decision to integrate belonged to local white judges. Here's the first point. Who would not want to desegregate anytime soon. Brown 2 allowed gradualism. There's my second point, which meant schools could integrate at a slow pace. Black leaders were disappointed because there was no longer an urgency to integrate black and white schools. There's my 3 points. So you would get the 3 marks like that. And that's how you do a 13A. Next time we will learn how to do a 13B.